It's the human stories, these astounding transformations in health that are driving this. So this is a woman I brought on the Oz show. She came to me about a year after this all started, and she told me her story. She started this just after her dad died of multiple complications of diabetic amputations, of amputations from diabetes. And then she was diagnosed with diabetes herself. She felt awful. She could walk a block or two before she had to stop because she couldn't breathe and because all her joints hurt. So obviously she had to do something. So she chooses this route. She goes wheat-free, she combines it with exercise, and a year later, she's down 150 pounds, and she went from walking a block or two and having to stop to, that was just before her first half marathon. This is the stuff that's driving this movement. So is it about weight loss? Yeah, it is, but it's about so much more than weight loss. It's about lives turned around. Since when does weight loss get rid of depression? Since when does weight loss get you off 4 pages of drugs? Well, so we're all having a grand time, and those wheat people noticed. And they say things like, in the United States, a growing number of Americans have been duped, including celebrities like singer Lady Gaga and Fox News host Bill O'Reilly, into believing recent claims that wheat not only is no longer necessary for strong, healthy bodies, but it has been nefariously been turned into a chronic poison and a cause of addicting eating habits and obesity. Or how about this one at the bottom? Dr. Brett Carver, chairman of the National Wheat Improvement Committee, rebuked these claims. He reported that modern wheat breeding has not changed protein composition. Well, that's an odd job to have, isn't it? Now, wait a minute. So the wheat people say, oh, no. We haven't changed anything. Yeah, it's about 2 feet, 3 feet shorter than it used to be. It looks real different. The seed head's different. The seed head's soft. But we haven't really changed anything in the plant. So how do we reconcile their claim that nothing has changed with the scientists who tell us, oh, of course things have changed. There are extensive changes. Wheat has changed. There's no question. So if you want to understand what the wheat industry is doing, think back to what the tobacco industry did when they came under fire because, oh no, Congressman, we have no information that shows that smoking cigarettes is related to lung cancer and heart disease. Yes, they did, right? 20 years worth. They came out in the process of discovery in the lawsuit. So the same tactics are being used. Of course it's changed. It's in the science. There are thousands of papers documenting changes introduced into wheat. Well, okay, so what? So now we know that wheat looks different. It's been changed by all sorts of techniques, some of them bizarre. We know that proteins are different. What does that really matter when you're making a sandwich for your kids to go to school? What is different? What is different about modern wheat? Many things are different, but one of the most important changes are changes in the gliadin protein. Now, to understand the story behind gliadin, I had to go back and understand what happened in New Guinea. In 1960, there was a physician named F. Curtis Dohan, and he was doing field work. New Guinea in 1960 was a really interesting place. It was a large island with hundreds of thousands of Stone Age humans. Think about that. People who had no contact with airplanes and primitive computers back then or automobiles, or they lived in the Stone Age. So anthropological groups, etc., went over there to study them. And Dohan went there to study this highland group of 6,500 people. He noticed that among these 6,500 people, only one showed the signs of schizophrenia. If any of you have known a schizophrenic, you know it's a pretty obvious thing, right? They hear voices, they hallucinate. These are the homeless people you often see on the streets. So he saw one person with the signs of schizophrenia. Now, while they're studying them, they're also trading with them. They're trading cornbread and rolls and pretzels and cookies for who knows what, skins, shrunken heads, I don't know. He notes that 65 more people show up with the signs of schizophrenia. So he comes back to the U.S. thinking, what could have been in the food that we traded with him that caused schizophrenia? Well, he comes back to a very unique position. He comes back to the VA hospital in Philadelphia. This is the age of large closed wards in hospitals. Remember those days where you didn't have a nice private room? You had a large ward with 40 other people in one bathroom? So he comes back, and he's in charge of the psychiatric section, he and his colleagues. And he says, hey, you know that thing I told you about in New Guinea? Let's try it here. Let's take these 40 schizophrenic patients and take all the wheat out of their diet and see what happens. So they do it over 4 weeks. They get much better. They're not cured. They're much better. Less paranoia, less hearing voices, better able to engage with other people. They add wheat back. It all comes back over 4 weeks. They take it away. They get better. They give it back. They get worse. Dr. Dohan publishes these data. And a British group says, well, that's kind of strange. Is that really true? Let's try it ourselves and see if we can validate that. So they try the same thing. Closed wards, 40 patients, take all the wheat out, give it back, back and forth. They saw the same exact thing. They published their observations. So the National Institutes of Health says, what the heck's with that? Why are psychiatrists seeing schizophrenics improve by taking off wheat and getting worse by adding it back? So this biochemistry group narrowed it down to the gliadin protein. And they found that gliadin, so remember, all the proteins in wheat are proteins from a grass. And when you cut your lawn, you don't save the clippings for a salad, do you? Well, why not? It's green. Can't you just chew it and swallow it and be healthy? No, you can't digest it because humans cannot consume the components of grasses. So this gliadin protein, likewise, you ingest the gliadin, you cannot fully digest it. If I eat eggs, I can break those proteins down to single amino acids. But I can't do that with a lot of the proteins in wheat. So I break it down to small pieces, to peptides. And those peptides act as opiates. They bind to the opiate receptors of the human brain. Now, there are many, many opiate receptors in the human brain. And the combination of receptors bound determine the effect. So if it's OxyContin, that may be different than morphine, which may be different from heroin, which will be different from the opiates in wheat. So what do the opiates in wheat do to you when you eat that beautiful blueberry muffin? Well, it depends. It depends on your individual susceptibility. That's part of the reason why this was not noticed for a long time, because it showed up in so many different ways. If you're a kid or child with attention deficit disorder or autistic spectrum disorder, it causes wild behavior, outbursts. It ruins your attention span. These kids, of course, struggle with attention span to begin with, but it becomes much worse in the presence of the gliadin-derived opiates. If you're prone to depression, it causes depression or mind fog. If you're prone to bipolar illness, it causes mania. If you're prone to paranoid schizophrenia, it causes paranoia and hearing voices. If you're prone to binge eating disorder, where you binge, or bulimia, where you binge and purge, the gliadin-derived opiates cause 24-hour-a-day intrusive food obsessions, food thoughts. So the effect of the gliadin-derived opiates depend on your unique susceptibility. That's if it is partially digested. What if gliadin is undigested? Because it's a protein from a seed of a grass, right? You can't digest it always. If it remains intact, it causes increased intestinal permeability. This is now quite well sorted out. This is Dr. Fasano's work from University of Maryland, now at Harvard. If gliadin is undigested, it opens the barriers in your intestinal tract. So those tight junctions between cells in your intestinal tract are pulled open, and things gain access into your bloodstream and into your body. Those abnormal things could be bacterial byproducts, could be other proteins or portions of proteins. What does that do? What happens when your intestinal tract is opened to all those foreign things that live in your intestinal tract? you get autoimmunity. So the first step in autoimmunity, that is when your body attacks itself because it thinks you're a fungus or a virus, that's autoimmunity. So these are the diseases. This is a partial list, by the way. It's not a complete list. There's a partial list of the autoimmune diseases caused by wheat consumption. Chronic fatigue, Crohn's disease, dermatitis herpetiformis, endometriosis, psoriasis, rheumatoid arthritis, scleroderma, transverse type 1 diabetes. Type 1 diabetes is largely a disease of wheat.